Hi, and welcome to Infomedia's training on how to write your own website copy. My name is Carrie Rollwagon. I'm the Communications Director here at Infomedia, and I'm going to be walking you through the training today. Now, at any point, if you want to take notes, go for it. I myself am a big note taker, so I understand. We'll also have the slides available through SlideShare. So if you want to just sit back and relax and watch the training, you can do that too, and the notes will be available that way. If you want further trainings, we have them listed at the Infomedia site. As far as what we're going to get into today, we're going to talk about why copywriting is important for your site, how to research the copy that you're going to be writing, how to organize it, how to actually write it, and how it should be arranged on your website. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to share my screen, and I realize that my PowerPoint is not on the right slide. So sorry about that. Okay, here we are. We're better now. All right, so we're talking about putting words to work, writing your own website copy. Again, my name is Carrie. I have been a copywriter here at Infomedia for over 5 years. So I've written tons of websites for our clients. I also wrote the Infomedia websites. And I've been a copywriter for longer than that, so about a decade. So I've written a lot, both for other clients and for myself. I have a personal website, and I co-founded a business, Church Street Coffee and Books, and I wrote the website for that business as well. So I have experience writing other people's websites and writing my own. And I have to tell you, writing your own is way harder than writing somebody else's. So what we're talking about today can be a little tricky. If you're having trouble with it, don't worry. Everybody has trouble with it. But I've come out on the other side pretty well. Both websites were very successful for me, so there is hope. We'll get through this today. We'll find a way through for you. Okay, so first we want to say, why do words matter? Okay, I'm a words person. I'm kind of a geek. Like I said, I started a bookstore. I wrote a book. I'm a book reviewer. I really like books. But some people don't, and that's cool. You don't have to be super into words. Words don't matter because I like them. That's not why we're talking about this today. Yeah, I'm really into words, but that's really irrelevant to whether or not you need to work on the copy for your site. But it is still very important. So why is it important? It's more than just this touchy-feely, we like words, let's write a lot. It's not about that. It's about more than that. Okay, so let's talk about a website. So we're going to use my website as an example today. I'm going to call myself out, basically. So this is my site. This is what people see when we're looking at a website. We see this picture of me looking super happy to be gazing off into traffic, which is what I was doing. We see the light and the color. We see this navigation, these social media links. And then, yeah, we see this copy here too. We see this text. But we're getting a bigger picture than that. The photo is telling a story, the light is telling a story, the way things are arranged is telling a story. Now let's look at what Google sees. Essentially, when Google is looking at your website, this is what it's seeing. A lot of words. It's seeing, I've highlighted in yellow, the words that we can read that are in English, and then it has a lot of words and code, different languages that are development languages that tell it what to do. But Google can't see your picture. Google can't see those pretty colors and the nice navigation. Now, those are still very important because without a good design, people can't navigate through your website. And if they're not using and navigating your website, Google doesn't like that either. But essentially, when Google is just accessing your site and your home page, it's seeing the words. So the words are very important. And I say that because a lot of times with a lot of our clients, and I had the tendency to do this as well, words are the last thing that we think about. We look at them as kind of like we sit in that first meeting when we're dreaming about our website. and we say, oh, yeah, copy, I've got that. The words will be easy, no problem. And then what happens is we don't do it, we keep not doing it, and usually our whole site is designed and developed before we even get to the words. And then we don't have a launch because we have nothing to put on our website. So something that seems so easy that we were thinking is such a small piece, we save till the end, and then we don't get it done at all. A lot of times we see the copy as non-essential. We see it as kind of a garnish. Like, we see it almost like the icing on a cake. But the reason we're kind of looking behind the scenes and looking at what Google sees is it's a more key ingredient than that. It's like the sugar in the cake or the flour in the cake. The cake cannot exist without it. So the more importance you give and the more attention you give to creating good content and good text for your website, the better your website will perform for you. Okay, so we're talking about what Google sees when it looks at your website. This is also, because this is on the home page of my website, and it's the first thing on the home page of my website, it's even more important to Google, because Google is going to prioritize your home page above all of your other pages. It's going to prioritize headlines above a paragraph, and it's going to prioritize what's at the top of a page more than what's at the bottom of the page. Essentially, what common sense is going to tell you is more important, it's probably going to be what Google sees as more important. So when you're writing your copy for your website, you want to take this into consideration. You want to think about, what do I want Google to know about me and my business? What is the most important thing that Google knows? Whatever that thing is, it's best to have it not front and center, but front and top on your website. So for me personally, for my website, what I wanted to optimize for is, if you search Carrie Rollwagon and book, I wanted my website to come up. So this is how I incorporated this into the copy. The two things I wanted to look important were Carrie Rollwagon, my name, and book. So you see, I've highlighted in blue here, that stuff turns up a whole lot. We also have a little local search optimization thrown in just for kicks, because Google likes that as well. But essentially, so this is called using keywords. It's called search engine optimization, using keywords effectively, certain words. You don't want to pack your paragraph so full of keywords that it doesn't make any sense. So as you see, like, you read the paragraph and it still sounds okay. As a human, you're not put off by it. But if I said, right here, Carrie Rollwagon is a book writer and book reviewer with a love for books and storytelling through books, you don't want to say it that much. But you want to have enough density that Google gets the idea, this is what's important on this website. So when do we start? Start now. You can start at any point in the process. That's the beauty of having a content management system like WordPress or Craft, that you can go into the back end of that system and update. So even if your website is already launched, you can go in and change the website to make it better. And it is very relatively easy to change the text. And especially if you're writing it for yourself, it's also relatively cheap. So it's always good to keep editing, to keep changing, and keep making it better. So if your website is already launched, great, you can still change the text. Now, if you're in the launch phase, if you're waiting on a website design, or you're waiting on development, this is also a great thing to be working on. Just be working on your copy so that when your design and development are done, you can plug the copy in, hit the ground running, and launch. But the very best time to work on your content is before you even start designing your website. The more content that you can have and deliver to your designer and developer, the better job they're going to do at creating a website that serves your company at the best it can. The reason is this. For some reason, when we sit in that first meeting and we're talking about copy, we have a tendency to think that certain sections of our business need a lot of copy and a lot of explanation, and often those end up not needing a lot. So we might say, okay, this part of my business is so complex, so I need, lots of different pages to explain this. But this other thing I'm going to talk about, this isn't a big deal, so I just need one page. Well, then the designer ends up designing it just the way we said, and then we go ahead and write the content and find out the thing we thought we needed 3 pages of content for actually can be pretty simply explained in 1. And the thing we thought was going to be really simple, we actually needed a much bigger presence for. Now, if you've already designed and developed your site, there are things we can do to change that. There are ways to hide pages or change pages, or you might pay to have your site redesigned. But if you can figure that stuff out in the beginning, which you will if you try to write the content first, it's going to just save you a lot of grief along the way. It might save you some time and money too, and you'll get a better website out of it. So if you can start before the launch process or before the design and development even begin and get your content, at least like start getting it together and figure out about how much you have to work with, it's just going to make your life a lot easier. Okay, so let's make a plan. Let's jump in. How are we going to do this? The first step is research. Now, when I'm writing a site for a client, I always put a lot of time into a research step. All of our copywriters here at Infomedia do. All of our designers do the same thing. For your own business, you might think, as I tended to think when I was writing my website, well, I've got this. I know my business. Like, I don't need to do a research step. But I'm going to really recommend that you do that anyway. Because a lot of times, yes, we do know our business, but we're actually too close to it. The things that we think are really important may not be important to our customers, or they might need a different angle on it. Or somebody else might have a great idea for something to incorporate into our site that we haven't even thought about incorporating into our business before. So here's the process I use for researching for another client, and you can apply it to yourself as well. First, evaluate your current materials. For most of our businesses, we will have written a lot of things already. We probably have advertising materials, brochures, maybe print ads, maybe social media, maybe newsletters, blogs, things like that. You can pull in that stuff, copy and paste it, put it all out, like lay it all on a desk or put it into a Word document or something. You can use that as a starting point. Now, you're not going to want to copy and paste the exact wording from your brochure onto your website. You're going to want to adapt it a little bit. But having that as a starting point is helpful because, it's easier than just looking at that blank page or that blank screen and starting from scratch. So gather your current materials in the first place. Second, if you already have a website, I recommend pulling the text from that website. When I say pulling text, I mean literally copy and pasting all of the stuff out of your current website and putting it into a text document, like a Microsoft Word document or a Google Docs or Pages. It doesn't matter what form, just put it in some kind of text document. Now you might say, that sounds weird. Why are you doing that? I'm rewriting my website because I want new copy. Well, that's true, but part of the reason we want to pull out the copy is because there are probably things on that site that you will forget about or that you need to address differently, and you won't want to forget about them completely. Almost all the websites that I work on that are more than a couple of years old, a lot of different people have been in that website, had their hands in it. I will do something like I'll find maybe a sub page, and halfway down the page there'll be a button, and I'll click on that button, and suddenly it'll open up maybe 15 pages of really important content that I wouldn't have known about if I hadn't been pulling out all the content. And we might take those 15 pages and say this needs to just be a paragraph, or we might say this needs to be higher up in how important it is, or we need to rewrite it, but we need to at least know it's there. We need to address it. So it's important to pull out all that copy. Also, most of the time when a website's been around for a while, different people have been adding to it, and different people might have put, a lot of times we have the same kinds of information on different pages. So when you pull it all out, you see it together, you can see better how it can be organized. Now, why can't you just read it on the website? Well, here's why. When you read it on the website, well, here's why. When you read a text document, you read like a Microsoft Word document. You start at the top, and if you keep reading, you're going to get to the end. That's how it works. It's a linear process. But when you read a website, you maybe start at the home page, and then halfway down the page, you see a button, you click the button, and then you go to another page. Then you read a little bit, you see a link, and then you go to another page. Well, by that point, you've missed half the content on this first page, half the content on the second page. Websites are not designed to be read in a linear fashion. They're designed so that you skip around a little bit. It's more like if you grew up in the 80s, you know about those choose your own adventure novels. It's not like a regular book where you read it cover to cover. It's like you are skipping around a little bit. So to make sure that you're covering all of your bases, you want to pull that text out into that linear document so you aren't missing anything. There are some other reasons to do that we will learn about in just a couple minutes. Okay, but in your research phase, you also want to get your keywords if you are using SEO, so search engine optimization. If you're going to buy keywords, you need to have them during your research phase. Don't start writing without them. Here's why. So remember back to that first paragraph where I was talking about books and using my name a lot. Well, I knew that I wanted to use the word book because I knew it was a keyword that I was wanting to optimize for. And so when I wrote the paragraph, I wrote it about the stuff that was going to let me use those words really easily. If I hadn't known what words those were, I might have written my paragraph about something different. I might have written it about web writing, or I might have written about my podcast, and I might not have mentioned those book-related things at all. And then when I tried to jam the word book into that paragraph, it would read really strangely. So instead, I want to know the keyword that I'm going to use before I begin so I can make sure my paragraph is going to be about that. It's going to sound so much better. It's going to sound organic, which is what Google wants and what people want. So essentially what I kind of sometimes explain it, the way I explain it to clients is saying, if you're building a house of SEO, your keywords are your bricks. You cannot start building without the bricks. Like you need those. You don't want to jam them in at the end. All right, so get your keywords if you have SEO. And the last stage of research is actually the most fun, I think, and it's checking out the competition. So check out your competition locally and check out your competition globally or nationally. Look at how different people do the business that you do. Look at what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong on their website. Now, you definitely don't want to just go to their page and copy out a whole paragraph. Please don't copy and paste their work. It will not end well for you. But you do want to get inspiration for what they're doing. Maybe you see, oh my goodness, like this business is really like they wrote this letter to customers that I love the tone that takes. I want that on my site. Or maybe they have a what to expect for new customers. And you're like, that would be great. That's a key thing for my site. So you do this research so that you can use those ideas and incorporate them into your site and make them perfectly tailored to what you do. So by the time you launch, it's not stealing the idea. You just get the inspiration for what your site should have. Okay, now we want to find our voice. Essentially, this can be kind of a broad strokes thing, but you want to think about before you start, is this going to be casual or formal? Am I going to use first person or third person? So am I going to say, we at Infomedia, or am I going to talk about Infomedia as if it's a separate entity? Are you going to use direct address or not? So, for example, on the Infomedia page, we always say something like, our customers love that we do XYZ. We don't say, you will love that we do XYZ. We don't use that direct address. But you can, this isn't right or wrong, but it is very helpful to decide at the beginning of the process how you'll handle these questions. If you already have brand messaging, you want to stick to it. You don't want your website to feel very different from your advertising or from your brochures or anything like that. that's confusing to customers. So stick with what brand messaging you already have. Okay, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on grammar because, you know, I don't want you guys to hate this webinar, but I did want to mention a few things. First, active is almost always better than passive voice. That's just really in any writing, and a website is no different. Okay, next I'm going to say pick a comma style. So you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, this is so nitpicky. I don't care about this, and I understand. But I pretty much guarantee if there are more than 10 people in your business, someone is going to have a strong opinion about the Oxford comma. I know it's weird, but it comes up all the time. So if you're like, what are you even talking about? Then don't worry, you're like 90% of people, but an Oxford comma is this. So if you have a list of 3 or more things, like lions, tigers, and bears, if you use the Oxford comma, you say lions, comma, tigers, comma, and bears. If you don't use the Oxford comma, you say lions, comma, tigers, and bears with no comma at like before and then the last one in the series. Is it a big deal? I don't find it to be a big deal. In my opinion, as an editor and a writer, neither way is right or wrong. The important thing is that you stay consistent throughout your website. So it is easier to decide before you're going in, are you going to use the Oxford comma or aren't you? It's a weird thing, but a lot of people care about it. So it's worth thinking about before you start. You also want to think, for the same reason, for dashes and ellipses, so ellipses would be those 3 little dots, are you going to use spaces around those or are you not? Neither way is right or wrong, but whatever way you pick, you want to be consistent throughout your document. Also, you want to make your content evergreen. What this means is really that you just don't want you don't want to write in an expiration date to your text. So for example, you don't want to say our company is 5 years old, because next year your company will not be 5 years old. And I know you're thinking this is not a big deal. I won't mind changing that, but you will mind changing it. Just don't write it in the first place. Say, for example, we were founded in 2012, because next year you'll still be founded in 2012. The year after that, you'll still be founded in 2012, but you won't be 5 years old anymore. So just as much as possible, make your copy timeless, make it evergreen. I run into this a lot in bios. People tend to want to say, my youngest is 3 years old, my oldest is 5. Well, you don't need that. Just don't mention it in the first place, and you won't have to change it every year. Okay, define your audience. You probably know who your customer base is. You want to think about who you're talking to with this website. Are you talking to experts, novices, potential customers, customers who are already loyal to you? This can run the gamut. At Infomedia, we have some, say, retail clients who have brand new customers all the time, who are explaining new products to them, showing new products to them, and they're going to speak one way. Then we also have some industrial clients who make machines, and they're not trying to bring in new clients. They just want their current clients to be able to find the certain parts for the machines that they know they already have easily. They don't need a lot of fluff. They don't need to convince you that it's the best machine. They just need you to be able to find the part that you need quickly. Those are 2 very different writing styles. So just know going in, who are you talking to? What audience are you talking to? Speaking of audience, we have a little bit of a challenge going in when we're writing a website, because we're already talking to 2 different audiences. We're talking to Google, and we're also talking to people. And sometimes those needs overlap. But there's like a Venn diagram in the middle. There's where what Google wants and what people want overlap. But sometimes those are different. So what do people want to see from your website? In general, people are going to want short, to the point content. Not always, but generally people want to be able to skim, find out what they're looking for easily. They don't want a lot of jargon. They want to be able to navigate your site easily. They want to be able to find their way around easily. Now, what does Google want from your website? Google wants lots of copy. Again, what Google can see from your website are the words. That's how it understands your website. So Google wants a lot of words. Google wants keywords. Now, Google doesn't want so many keywords that it's awkward. That's called keyword stuffing, and it doesn't want that. But keywords are how Google understands your website, so it does want those words. Google really likes having specifics about your location. If you're a brick and mortar business, if you exist as a physical entity, Google values that. So if you can include your address, your phone number, anything to prove to Google that you exist in the world, it's going to give you a little more authority. Now, if you're an individual, like on my website, I don't give my address. Yes, Google might like that, but I wouldn't like that. People would show up at my house. So definitely prioritize privacy concerns. But in general, if you're a brick and mortar, you're going to want to put information about your location. And not just your address, but your city and state. All of that stuff that proves to Google you really exist. And Google really likes fresh, current information. Okay, so how can we compromise and talk to Google and to people at the same time? One way we do that is just to break up the text. So that way, your designer can help you do this a lot. So remember, on the home page of my website, I have that little box that has a description. Now, if you scroll down, you would see more text, but it's broken up into different blurbs and in different areas so that if you're a person scrolling through, you understand what the content is for and you're not just overwhelmed by a big mass of copy. But Google also gets a big mass of copy. So break up the text. Your designer can help you do that. You can add subheads. Subheads are your best friend in this Google and people game. So if you have this huge, long copy block, it can be really overwhelming for people, especially if they're on a mobile device, because you're scrolling through this whole long thing and there's no break. That's just annoying. But if you break up that copy with a bunch of small subheads, for one thing, people like that because then it's not just this block of copy and they can scroll through it easily, they can skim it, they can find the stuff they're really interested in. But Google, in that case, not only gets a copy block, which it already likes a lot of copy, it also gets a lot of heading styles. And when you put a heading style into your website, Google prioritizes that more than the other words on your page. So it's giving Google even more than it had in the first place. So subheads are great. If you want to add that fresh extra content, a blog is a great way to do that. We really recommend it. And you can ask your designer for different ideas for how to put text into different places. Maybe in a call to action button, maybe you're going to list your services in a creative way that involves some text. There are different ways your designer can help you with that. Whew, okay, so let's get organized. The first thing you want to do, once you look at your text and you start figuring out your key areas, is you want to develop an outline. So if you already have your sitemap, which if you're in development, you are. So if a designer has already given your sitemap, or if your website's already launched, then you already have a sitemap, then you want to stick to your sitemap. You want to arrange your content according to that map, or you want to have it changed before you begin. But essentially, you need to kind of follow that outline or get your designer and developer to change it for you. If you don't have a sitemap, then that's great. Like I think it's actually best to start with content first and develop your sitemap from there. You really can do either one though. But if you don't have a sitemap, start by seeing where the natural divisions and how your copy should naturally be organized. And then think about what pages you're going to want on your website. Now you might be saying, I have no idea what pages I want on my website. Well, there are a lot of common ones. You can look at what most people do and see if you need these or want these on your site. Okay, so let's go over these really quickly. You have your home page. You're definitely going to have this. It's your main page. On this page, we've already talked. We want keywords. We want calls to action. So those can be buttons asking somebody to do an action. They can be just like, you can just highlight, link out from your text to another page. That can be a call to action. And I like to have an overall description of what you do somewhere on the home page. so that Google can understand it and people can understand this is where I am, this is what's going on here. Okay, you'll also want to probably have an about section. Now, the reason I say write a short history section is that we have with so many clients, I see them laboring over this really long explanation of, you know, so-and-so used to own our company, and then it was transferred to so-and-so, and then their cousin took over, and probably nobody cares about this except for you. So I'm not saying you can't have that story. If you have a long story that's compelling, by all means share it. Or if there's something your customers need to know, like we used to be in this really identifiable red building, but we moved to this blue building 2 blocks over. It's the same company. That's fine. You know, but don't overkill this page. I see a lot of clients spending so much time on their about section and not creating any of their other pages. They're trying to perfect that one. It's way more important to just have a couple sentences on your about section and more content on your other pages. You don't need to go into a ton of history here. I also like to put the address and some contact info or a link to that on the about page, because even if you have a contact page, people are probably going to go, some people are going to go to your about page looking for that information. So I like to give them a way to find it. All right, your about page might include employee bios or staff bios, or you might have another page for that. Now, if you've ever tried to put together staff bios by asking people to send you bios, you know that you probably got one really silly sentence from somebody's Twitter feed as their whole bio, and then you probably got somebody else's resume, and those things don't really match up. What you want is like a parallel construction. You want everybody's bio to be about the same length, about the same tone. You don't want one to be super quirky and the other one to just be a laundry list of all the awards that they've gotten professionally. You want those to be just to feel similar. So what we like to do at Infomedia is send out a questionnaire. I don't ask people, what do you want in your bio? I send them a questionnaire with some professional questions like, what jobs have you had that that help you in your current career? But I also have some silly questions because our bios are a little bit quirkier, like, you know, what's your favorite app? What's your favorite food to snack on while you're working? That kind of thing. So I ask a lot of questions, about 15 questions in that questionnaire. I usually only use like 3 to 5, but that gives me a lot of stuff that I can kind of pull from the bio. They tend to be a lot more consistent that way. Okay, for your contact, you want your address. You may or may not want to put a map, but Google does seem to value having a map on your site, so you might want to consider it. And whether or not you put a phone number is up to you. I will say, I know a lot of businesses aren't doing it anymore. As an owner of previous owner of a business, I understand that because you get a lot of phone calls that are a waste of time, just like bots and things. But I would still recommend that you do it because Google likes it for one thing, and then depending on your customers, a lot of your customers might really want to have it. All right, so let's move on to products and services. I want to pause before that because a lot of times we gloss over products and services. We're just like, oh yeah, we've got that. When products and services really might be the most important thing to our users, our customers, and really to our bottom line. Products and services are probably what you're selling. They're probably what's making you money and your whole point of having a website in the first place. But a lot of times we don't think about how people are going to navigate through them. We don't put a lot of thought into how we're going to list them. I would say this is where you probably do want to put a lot of time and effort. Another thing to remember is, if possible, write an original product description. Don't just copy and paste it. If you're selling a wholesale product, they probably sent you a product description. Well, if you copy and paste that and use the exact same product description, probably there are a few other sites on the internet doing the exact same thing. When Google finds duplicate content, it can do different things. Sometimes it cancels out both. What it's likely to do in this situation is prioritize the content that comes from the site with the most authority. So if you sell a product that is also sold on Amazon, Amazon is going to get the credit for that product description and that SEO. You probably are not. because you had the exact same content, and Google decides one to prioritize over the other. So what you'd want to do is just take those product descriptions, rewrite them just a little bit. You can use the same technical specifications. You can use some of the same words. You don't have to change the entire thing, but just reword it enough so Google isn't seeing it as an exact match in the content. Okay, so with blogs, you want to link to other blogs. I mean, other blogs on your website. It's fine to link to blogs outside too, but what we're talking about here is the best practice for your site. So link to your other blogs, use inline links. So if I am writing a blog about photography, I'll just highlight the word photography and link it to our page on our website for the services for photography, that kind of thing. And this is an opportunity to incorporate a lot of SEO. Okay, so we're well over halfway into this talk, and I'm just now starting to talk about writing. But that's how it is. Like, a lot of this internet writing is research. So if you hate writing, good news, there's not that much of it. Like, a lot of it is research and putting your elements together in the first place. But when you start the actual writing process, first you want to make sure to be organized. Things will go a lot more smoothly for you if you're organized and you're not trying to think, oh no, what's my latest draft? Do I want this one or this one? Which one has been approved? Whatever. Okay, again, I want to emphasize you either want to work from a sitemap or create an outline that will eventually be used to help determine your sitemap. Again, you want to create that text document to work out of. If you went through that research page, that's what you pulled all your current copy into. If you're creating a new website, that's great too. You just want to create a text document, and there are lots of reasons why. One reason is it's easier with edits. So say you have other people who are going to want to improve your work. That's probably true for most of us. We have a boss or a manager. If you write everything in WordPress, that person is going to go and first of all, have to go into every single page, whereas with one document, they can just look at a document. But also, they're going to make random changes that you don't want them to make. So if you just give everybody, say 5 managers need to look at your work. If you just send them all the password and let them log in and make their own changes, you might have decided that you do want the Oxford comma and they don't use the Oxford comma. Or you might have really casual writing and they'll make it really formal. It's just they're going to do something to that copy you don't want. So what I would really recommend is that you send them a document. And don't just have a Google Doc that everybody can make their same changes to. You want a record of all the changes. Because it's something like this is going to happen. Say you have Manager X, and Manager X is at the top of the company, has a lot of power. And you have Manager Y. Manager Y is a frustrated novelist. They get a copy of this website copy, and they just go to town unleashing their creativity on this. And you get it back, and you're like, these changes are terrible. Manager X thinks they're terrible, and Manager X tells you, just throw out, I want to go back to the way we were before Manager Y saw it. This is sounding like an algebra problem. Anyway, what you want to be able to do is pull that old copy. Or say like things get changed and maybe you want a paragraph from 2 drafts ago or whatever. Just make sure you are saving them as different drafts. You have different copies of your work along the way. Okay, set reasonable goals for yourself for length. And I mean length of time that you have to write, like give yourself enough time, but also just don't go crazy on thinking you have to write 1,000 words on every single topic. If you're writing a site, you're going to be writing a lot of different pages. Even if you have to launch with a couple sentences, it's better to launch with a couple sentences on every page than to launch with one full page and nothing else on your site. I mean, ideally, you do neither. But if you're stuck on one service, just write a couple sentences on it and move on to the next service. Chances are, once you're a few services in, you'll have more ideas and you can come back to that first one anyway. But either way, just don't feel like you have to get every page perfect as you go along. Just write something and you can go back and edit it later. Okay, so I know we all struggle a little bit with writer's block. Even people who love writing struggle with writer's block, but especially people who hate writing really struggle with this. So I've included a link to my blog on this topic, which it goes a little more in depth, but there are a few tricks that I've found are really helpful, especially with the business leaders that I've worked with in getting them to write more easily. One is to work from an outline. Now, this doesn't have to be a crazy long outline with lots of Roman numerals or whatever. It can be a Post-it note with you jot down the 4 things you want to get across. It can be very simple. But it does help when you're staring at that blank page to know, I want to talk about these 4 things. This is where I have to go. This is how I'm going to get there. All right, again, you can write a little and add more later. And then if you're looking at this blank page and it's psyching you out, try writing somewhere else. Try opening your email and just writing there. Sometimes that's easier because it can feel more casual and we can get out of our head a little bit. We realize this is just a draft. It's not a big deal. Email it to yourself and then copy and paste it into the Word document. Or you can write by hand if you prefer to write by hand. Another thing that I think helps a lot of people is writing by just dictating to a voice memo on your phone or something. So if you have a lot of good ideas in the car, just take that, in your phone in the car, set it up before you start driving. Please be safe. But you can record your thoughts and then, copy them out later. Or you can pace around in your apartment and just talk to yourself about what you want to include. That can be writing. You don't have to picture yourself as Ernest Hemingway with the typewriter or something like that. It doesn't have to be that serious. The way that you feel like you get your ideas across best is the best way to start writing. Okay, you definitely want to edit your work. And if possible, you want to have somebody else edit your work as well. This is another reason that I think it's important to use that word processing client, because it's so much easier to edit it all at once. Say different people have had their hands in it, different managers have been changing things. You have another chance to look at it and make sure it's all consistent. Also, you can do a spell check and a grammar check when it's in these. Now, you might be saying, Carrie, you could do a spell check in WordPress. First, I'd say, why are you talking to me? This is not a live webinar. Just kidding. But also, I'd say that's true. You have a spell check. But if you're trying to write an entire website, then you're going to have to go into each one of those pages, into each one of those content fields, and do a separate spell check. That is a real pain. When you can just take it once in one document, run a spell check, and it gets your entire document. Then you can copy and paste it into your WordPress or whatever CMS you're using later. Okay, again, you want your editors and your managers to edit the text in the document. You can put it in the website later, if possible. And recruit a proofreader. Now, your proofreader, you can hire a proofreader, or you can just ask somebody else to look at it. There might be somebody in your office who's very good at this, but even if there isn't anybody who's specifically wonderful at it, you don't have to get a grammar expert to look at this. You do need a fresh set of eyes on it to make sure it's making sense. You don't want to be the only person who's going to look at this. We're all going to miss stuff. We could all use an extra eye on our work. Okay, so let's talk a little more about making Google happy, which is a big part of writing a website. All right, so we've talked a little about search engine optimization. We'll talk a little bit more. First of all, again, we've said this, but go easy on the keywords. Just make sure you're not saturating your copy so much with keywords that it's awkward for people to read. As long as it's easy for people to read, you're going to be just fine. Also, I would say work on your meta titles and your meta description. So what this means is on the back end of your website, you have the opportunity to change a meta description and a meta title if you add a plugin like Yoast. That's Y-O-A-S-T. I believe it's free for WordPress. For different CMSs, they're going to have different ways to do this. But essentially, it just lets you tell Google what you want the meta title and meta description to be. And I think that's worth doing. You don't need to do it if this is confusing. It's not a huge deal, but it's something that we do as a best practice at Infomedia, so I did want to mention it. Oh, I went to the next slide. Whoops. Sorry. Again, pay attention to your heads and subheads and incorporate keywords into places that matter, like taglines, slider text. Talk to your designer about some ways that you can do this. And make sure that not only your designer knows, but also your developer knows. Because the back-end development is going to be important for what Google can read too. So for example, if you have a picture and the words are just embedded in part of the picture, then Google is not going to see the words, it's going to see the picture. What you want is to have a picture, and you want your developer to put a headline code on that. I know this is getting really, really specific, but if you just tell your developer and your designer, make sure that they know you're trying to optimize for SEO, make sure they know the particular things that matter to you about that, and they'll handle it for you. Okay, you also want to connect your website to itself. So Google does not want you to keep your information, like it doesn't want one section for about that doesn't interact with anything else, and one section for your contact, and one section for your bios. What it wants is more like a spider web. Like it wants everything to be touching everything else. That helps Google understand how people are using your site. It helps Google understand what's going on your site. So it likes that. So you want to be liberal with those links. You want to use buttons. You want to use calls to action. You want to be linking to other things in your page as much as possible. That's not going to bother your users because your users know they don't have to go on every tangent. They don't have to click every time you have a link, but it is going to help Google. And in general, with your whole website, you always want to be leading to something else. You are not trying to get your reader to keep going until they get to the end of the page and stop. You don't want your reader to stop. You want this to be more of an organic kind of adventure, so hopping from page to page and back again. You want them to go like that choose your own adventure novel. You don't want them to just stop. The only times you want your readers to stop are at the point of sale, like after they have bought something or after you've gotten a lead from them. Otherwise, you want to just give them more and more to explore. You can do that with links and buttons and things like that, but you also do that with how you write the copy in an inviting way, in a way that leads them to other parts of your website. Okay, so speaking of stopping, we are going to stop. We're not Google, and we're not creating a website. I wanted to thank you guys for joining me today. If you have, I hope that this is helpful and you feel empowered to write your website copy and excited about that. When you are excited, just go ahead and start then. Like, don't make this too precious. Don't try to get everything absolutely perfect. Just start getting your draft together. It is a difficult process to write your own website copy, but it can be very rewarding. It can be excellent for your business, and it can make your website a lot stronger. So again, if you want the slides to this presentation, there should be a SlideShare link where you found the presentation, or you can go to, I think it's infomedia.com, spelled out, .com, DOTCOM is our SlideShare link. If you want more trainings, they're on the Infomedia training videos page, and we'll have more of these later. We also present the trainings live in Birmingham once a month at Innovation Depot, and you can check our website for the dates on that. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time.